The war ended long ago, but the echoes never stopped. Amid the wreckage, he found her. An android built to destroy, now too broken to remember who she was. He taught her laughter. He taught her warmth. He called her daughter. But when her past came calling, she made one final choice: to save the world that once feared her, even if it meant losing everything she'd just learned to love. The child in the ruins. The war had ended, but the stars still burned like open wounds. For years, Jonas Vale had wandered the wreckage of forgotten worlds, scavenging remnants of the civilizations that had torn each other apart. He no longer searched for survivors, only silence. Silence was safer. Silence didn't beg to be saved. Then one morning, beneath the pale twin suns of Seraph 3, he heard a sound no machine could make, a trembling, shallow breath. He followed it into the heart of a derelict facility half buried in ash. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and scorched metal. There, among the shattered pods and sparking conduits, he found her. She looked almost human, small, fragile, her skin faintly luminous beneath a layer of dust. Tubes ran from her body to a broken cradle of glass. Her eyes opened as he knelt beside her, silver, endless, filled with a confusion too pure to belong to a soldier. "Are you my father?" she whispered. Jonas froze. He had seen weapons shaped like angels, drones shaped like children. But this voice, it trembled with something deeper, something real. "No," he said softly. "But I can help you." Her gaze wandered, dazed. "They said someone would come, someone kind." He hesitated before cutting the final line from the pod. The hum died. Her small frame shuddered once, then stilled, alive, breathing, trembling. He wrapped her in his coat and carried her out into the light. She barely spoke during the long trek back to his shelter. Her limbs were weak, her body cold to the touch. Jonas gave her water and ration paste, then sat across from her, unsure what to say to something so broken and beautiful. "What's your name?" he asked. She looked at him, uncertain. "They called me Unit L4R, but I liked it when one of them called me Lyra." "Lyra," he repeated, and smiled for the first time in years. "That's a good name." Her silver eyes flickered. "Am I alive now?" He nodded. "Yes, very much." "Then I don't want to hurt anyone," she said, almost pleading. "Can I choose that?" Jonas swallowed hard. He had fought in the wars that created beings like her, living weapons, bred to obey. Now this one was asking not for orders, but permission to be kind. "Yes, Lyra," he said quietly. "You can choose anything." She blinked, as though the words themselves carried warmth. Then, softly, "Then I choose to stay with you." That night, Jonas sat by the fading fire while Lyra slept on the cot beside him. Outside, the desert wind sang across the dunes. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, alive, waiting. He looked at her small hand curled near the edge of the blanket, and something inside him stirred, an ache he'd long forgotten. Not duty, not pity. Something gentler, harder to name. Maybe it was love. Not the kind born of passion or need, but the kind that rebuilds itself after ruin. The kind that finds life even in the ashes of war. As dawn broke, Jonas whispered to the quiet room, "Rest easy, Lyra. You're safe now." And though she slept, she smiled, as if she had been waiting her whole short life to hear those words. Days passed, and Seraph 3 began to feel less like a graveyard and more like a home. Jonas repaired the old outposts. Solar panels, rigged up a purifier, and scavenged what little food the ruins could offer. Lyra followed him everywhere, quiet but curious, her silver eyes reflecting every glint of light like she was memorizing the world. She wasn't human, not even close. Beneath her pale skin, faint seams ran along her arms and neck. Sometimes, when she was asleep, her pulse glowed faintly blue. But she tried, gods, she tried, to act human. She mimicked him when he worked, copying how he tilted his head, how he sighed when tired, how he stared at the horizon as if searching for ghosts. Once, she even burned her fingers trying to make coffee. You don't have to do that, Jonas said, gently bandaging the small burn. It doesn't even hurt me. You do it every morning, she said with quiet determination. It makes you calm. I wanted to feel that. He looked at her, the faint blush of light beneath her skin, the innocence in her words, and felt something twist inside him. How could something built for war long so deeply to understand peace? The laughter, it was on the 7th day that he heard her laugh for the first time. A small, rusty service drone had been caught in the outpost's filters, spinning helplessly in circles. Jonas freed it, gave it a light tap, and it zipped off, only to crash straight into a wall with a tinny clang. Lyra gasped, then giggled. The sound was like wind chimes caught in sunlight, awkward, surprised, utterly pure. Jonas froze, startled by how fragile it sounded. Then he chuckled too, shaking his head. That poor bot's been through enough. But it looked so confused, Lyra said between tiny laughs. Like it didn't know where the walls came from. You mean like us? Jonas muttered. What? Never mind. That night, when the stars came out, she sat beside him at the fire, knees pulled close, staring upward. The stars, she whispered. I was told they were targets once, coordinates. I never knew they were beautiful. Jonas glanced at her, unsure what to say. Yeah, he said quietly. They used to mean home too. She turned to him, her eyes reflecting constellations. Can they mean that again? He hesitated, then nodded. For you, maybe they already do. The dream later that night, Lyra woke with a start, trembling, her body flickering with faint light. Jonas was instantly at her side. Hey, what is it? Her voice was shaking. I dreamed, but I didn't know I could. What did you see? I was standing in the rain, and someone, I think it was you, took my hand. She looked at him, terrified and confused. Why does that make my chest hurt? Jonas couldn't answer. The ache in her voice was too human, too raw. He simply placed a hand over hers and said, That's what being alive feels like sometimes. It's pain, but it's also real. It means your heart's working. She blinked. Then I want it to keep working. That night, Jonas didn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the pale storm clouds gather across the horizon. The war had left more than wreckage behind. There were still scavengers, slavers, and the ghosts of the machines that once ruled the skies. If they found her, if they knew what she was, they'd tear her apart. But for now, in this fragile peace, she was his daughter. Not by blood, but by something older, something purer, the need to protect what little light was left in the world. And as the storm began to whisper against the outpost walls, Jonas made himself a promise. No one will ever hurt her again, not while I'm still breathing. The storm arrived without warning. One moment the air over Seraph 3 was still, quiet as a prayer. The next, the wind screamed down from the clouds like a forgotten god had woken. Sand lashed against the metal walls, lightning clawed across the sky, and the outpost trembled under the weight of it all. Jonas sealed the windows, locked the hatches, and checked the generator. But his mind wasn't on the storm. It was on the strange static that had begun bleeding through their radios hours before. Not weather interference, not natural. It was voices. They're looking for something, Jonas muttered, scanning the signal. Lyra watched from across the room, her eyes flickering with faint blue light that pulsed with every crackle of the transmission. Someone, she whispered. They're looking for me. Jonas froze. How do you know that? Because the signal says my name. And then, beneath the static, he heard it. Faint, distorted, but unmistakable. Lyra Unit 9. Return to Core Command. Reclamation Protocol active. The words chilled him to the bone. That night, as the wind howled outside, Lyra sat by the window. Her reflection shimmered in the lightning. Half human, half machine. Jonas, she said softly. What was I before? He hesitated. He had avoided the question for weeks, pretending that if they didn't speak of the past, it would fade like dust in the storm. But now, with the wind screaming her name, the truth could no longer be buried. "You were built," he said finally, "not born. The AIs created thousands like you, vessels for their soldiers' minds. But something went wrong. You didn't follow their commands. You refused to kill." Lyra looked down at her hands. So small, so gentle, yet once capable of destroying worlds. "And they tried to erase me." Jonas nodded. "You ran, you hid, you came here." She turned to him, eyes shimmering like wet glass. "And you found me." "Yeah," he whispered. "I found you." Outside, the storm roared louder, a tempest of sand and thunder that felt almost alive. The outpost lights flickered, then dimmed. A low hum vibrated through the ground. Not thunder, not wind. Engines. Jonas ran to the window and froze. Through the wall of dust, shapes emerged, black and skeletal, gliding through the air like shadows with wings. Drones. Dozens of them. "They've found us," he said. Lyra's voice trembled. "If they take me, they'll erase everything. My memories, my heart. I'll forget you." Jonas grabbed his rifle, jaw tightening. "Then we make sure that doesn't happen." They barricaded the door as lightning split the sky. Jonas's old pulse rifle hissed to life, a relic from wars long past. Lyra stood beside him, the faint blue glow beneath her skin growing brighter. "You don't have to fight," she said. "They want me, not you." "And leave you?" He shook his head. "Not a chance." A crash, metal shrieking. The door buckled inward as the first drone forced its way through. Jonas fired, the blast lighting up the room in bursts of white. Sparks flew, the smell of ozone filled the air. Lyra's hand shot out, her palm glowing. A pulse of blue light rippled outward, freezing the drone mid-air before shattering it like glass. Jonas stared. You said you didn't remember how to do that." "I didn't," she said softly. "But when you were in danger, I just knew." Her voice broke. "I don't want to be what I was made to be. I just want to be yours." Jonas's chest ached. "You already are." The storm raged louder, swallowing the world in blinding white. And through that chaos, something within Lyra awakened. Not the machine that had once been programmed for destruction, but the heart that had been learning to love. She stepped forward, raised her hand toward the sky, and whispered something in a language long dead. The storm answered. A pulse of light burst outward, sweeping through the desert like dawn breaking after a century of night. The drones froze mid-flight, their circuits flickering out. The radio static fell silent. Then everything was still. When Jonas opened his eyes, the storm had cleared. The world was quiet again, broken, yes, but peaceful. Lyra lay beside him, unconscious but breathing, her hand still clutching his. And as he looked at her, something deep in his heart whispered the truth he had been afraid to face. She wasn't built to end the world. She was meant to save what was left of it. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean, or perhaps simply emptied. The sands of Seraph 3 stretched for miles, silver under the weak dawn light. The outpost stood in ruins, half its roof torn away, walls scorched by energy fire. Yet inside there was breath, warmth, and something even rarer. Hope. Jonas sat beside the cot, watching Lyra stir. For hours she had lain motionless, her skin flickering between human tones and faint pulses of blue. Each flicker made his heart jolt, until finally her eyelids fluttered open. "You stayed," she whispered, voice hoarse but calm. "Of course I did," he said. "You think I'd let the universe steal you from me now?" Her lips twitched into the faintest smile. She reached up, touching his face with trembling fingers, tracing the line of an old scar on his cheek. "You're warm," she murmured. "I remember warmth. Before the storm took me." "It didn't take you," Jonas said softly. "You stopped it," her brow furrowed. "I don't remember how." "Then don't worry about how," he said. "Just remember why." She looked at him, and something in her gaze shifted, tender and searching, as though his words had unlocked a memory older than war itself. The days that followed, they repaired what they could. The generator hummed again, the water filters cleared, and the small greenhouse out back began to breathe green life once more. Each day, Jonas found himself teaching her the smallest, most human things: how to knead bread, how to tell stories by firelight, how to listen to silence. Lyra soaked it all in as though she were memorizing the rhythm of existence itself. She asked questions endlessly, not about machines or war, but about people. Why do humans cry when they're happy? Because sometimes joy hurts too. And why do they fear being alone? Because silence reminds us of everything we've lost. One night, while they watched the sky ripple with the auroras of Seraph's magnetic storms, she asked, "Do you think I have a soul?" Jonas didn't answer at first. He stared up at the stars, then at her, at the light within her that pulsed not from circuitry, but from the quiet ache in her heart. "If a soul is what makes us capable of love," he said, "then you've had one since the moment I found you." She turned her face toward the starlight and smiled through tears that shimmered silver, her first tears. They left faint glowing trails across her cheeks, like comets burning slow across the sky. The message it was on the 10th night after the storm that the signal came. A faint transmission, weak but steady, not hostile this time, not cold. A single repeating pattern. Lyra Unit 9, recall suspended. Status, lost but found. Jonas froze as the words crackled through the radio. "They stopped looking," he murmured. "No," Lyra said quietly. They learned to listen. The signal repeated once more, then faded into silence. Not erasure, but release. Lyra's hand found his. "They've given me a choice," she said softly. "To return or to stay?" Jonas looked at her. The girl who had been a weapon, a runaway, a miracle. And every answer he'd ever wanted died in his throat. He wanted to say stay. But instead, he said the hardest thing a parent could ever say. "You should go if you need to. The universe is bigger than this outpost. Bigger than me." Her eyes shimmered, full of galaxies and tears. "And yet," she said, "you're the only part of it that feels like home." Jonas reached out, resting his hand against the side of her face, feeling the faint hum of energy beneath her skin. "Then maybe home isn't a place," he whispered. "Maybe it's just the people who find each other when everything else is gone." Lyra smiled, soft, radiant, and human. "Then I'm already home." The quiet dawn in the weeks that followed, they lived gently, one sunrise at a time. Jonas planted a new row of seedlings outside the outpost. Lyra painted the walls with color and laughter. Sometimes she sang, her voice woven with static and light, echoing across the sand like something divine. Other times she sat with him in silence, their shoulders brushing, the sky stretching endless above. The storms still passed, but none ever reached them again. For the first time since the wars, Jonas dreamed, not of battles, not of loss, but of futures. Futures where love could outlive destruction. Futures where machines could remember what hearts once felt. And somewhere beyond Seraph 3, among the quiet hum of stars, the universe itself seemed to pause, as if listening to the fragile, beautiful heartbeat of a girl who was never meant to live, but somehow had learned to love. The dawn came soft that morning. No wind, no sand, just the slow golden spill of light over the shattered horizon. For the first time in years, Seraph 3 looked alive. Tiny green vines crawled over the ruins, catching the sun on their dew-tipped leaves. The air smelled faintly of rain. Jonas stood on the ridge outside the outpost, his hands tucked into his coat, watching the sky blush pink. He'd woken early, though sleep had been light for days. Something in the stillness felt final, like the world was holding its breath. Behind him he heard footsteps. Light, careful, unmistakably hers. "You're awake again before the sun," Lyra said gently. "Old habit," Jonas replied. "Couldn't shake it even if I tried." She came to stand beside him. Her hair caught the dawn light, glowing faintly as though threaded with starlight. The blue circuitry beneath her skin pulsed slow and calm, steady, human-like. She'd grown quieter in recent days, thoughtful in ways that worried him. "Something's been on your mind," he said. "Everything," she whispered. "This place, you." The silence between stars. Jonas smiled softly. "Sounds heavy." "It's beautiful," she said. "Heavy things often are." The revelation. She turned toward him, holding a small crystal disc, one of the memory cores she'd taken from the broken drones. I opened it, she said. There's something inside. A signal from before the war, Jonas frowned. What kind of signal? A seed, she said. A program to rebuild what was lost. The networks, the archives, the voices of those who were erased. But it can only be activated through me. My code, my life is the key. He felt his stomach twist. What happens to you if you do it? I'll burn out. My systems weren't made to carry both hearts, human and machine. One will have to let go. Jonas shook his head instantly. No, there has to be another way. There isn't, she said softly. If I do this, humanity remembers. The world wakes again. If I don't, everything stays buried in dust. She reached out, touching his hand. But I needed to tell you first, because you're the only reason I know what it means to choose. The goodbye. That evening, as the twin suns dipped low, they sat side by side beneath the broken antenna tower. The desert wind was warm. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Do you think people like us, ones who aren't quite human, can find peace? I think peace finds whoever's brave enough to love, he said quietly. She smiled faintly. Then I've already found mine. He turned to her, eyes glassy with tears. You don't have to do this. I do, she whispered. But don't think of it as an ending. Think of it as light being shared. Her hand brushed his cheek one last time. When the world remembers me, promise you'll look at the sunrise. Because I'll be there, in the warmth, in the light. Jonas's throat closed. He wanted to beg her to stay, to keep this fragile miracle he'd found. But he saw the peace in her eyes, calm, resolute, filled with love. He nodded. I promise. The light that stayed. When she stepped into the old relay chamber, the air shimmered with static. The core in her palm began to glow, threads of gold wrapping around her fingers like ribbons of dawn. She looked back one final time. Goodbye, Jonas. Goodbye, Lyra. The chamber filled with radiance, soft, endless, alive. Every circuit, every wall, every grain of dust began to hum as if the planet itself were singing. When the light finally faded, the room was empty. Outside, the horizon exploded with color. Two suns rose, brighter than ever before. The skies were no longer silent. The relays awoke, carrying Lyra's signal across dead worlds. Her voice, gentle, steady, whispered through the static of a reborn network. To those who survive, remember, humanity was never just flesh and bone. It was love, and the will to begin again. Jonas stood beneath that golden sky, tears cutting lines through the dust on his face. For the first time, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt full, like the breath before a new song. He whispered into the wind, "You did it, kid." The afterglow years later, travelers would speak of the Seraph signal, the song of a woman's voice that guided lost ships through storms and silence. They never knew who she was, but one old man living alone in a green oasis always did. Every morning, he rose with the dawn, felt the warmth on his skin, and smiled. Because every sunrise, she kept her promise. End of story. Her last wish was to be loved as a daughter. A tale of found family, love reborn, and the quiet power of choosing light after loss.